Hey,
Okay.
Bruce, how you doing? Okay. Are you glad that Freddie's back in town or no? Okay.
Are you glad that Fred's back in town or not?
I'm very happy he's in town, even though he told me he's going to be away for Shabbat already. Like, can't be in town like, for more than 3-4 days in a row. Okay. So we're going to start. We are today in, yes, it's the book of Yechezkel, Ezekiel, chapter 9. Chapter 9. Maxine?
Hello.
I miss
I
you.
know it's raining too much.
Oh, okay.
It brings back too many memories of Vancouver.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay, let's do it. So in chapter 9, chapter 9 is the second unit of this long prophecy that Yechezkel has that starts on chapter 8 and goes all the way to chapter 11. You remember we said 3 units. This is the second unit. Okay, now in the previous chapter, just kind of a little bit remind ourselves what we're talking about. So the elders of Judah came to Ezekiel, right, when he's home, and then he is having this vision. He's been taken into on this virtual tour in Jerusalem. And what happens, God shows him, he's like taking this virtual tour, and he is taken to the temple, and he sees the different forms and the different places of Avodah Zarah, of the idol worshiping and all the bad stuff that is happening right there. And as we discussed, he's going closer and closer. There's a progression in terms of the severity of this Avodah Zarah, both in terms of location and the type of Avodah Zarah and who is doing that. Okay? And then the big surprise was that at the end of the chapter, the text says that it is because of what? Injustice, basically, and averot sheben adam lechavero, and this interrelationship issues and injustice and killing and all that kind of stuff. That is the reason why Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, not because of the Avodah Zarah. Well, in addition to, let's be clear.
Mm-hmm.
So chapter 9 continues from that point and going to specify the punishment that the city of Jerusalem is going to have. Again, this is part of the vision. It's not happening in reality. This is only in Yechezkel's head.
Oh.
Okay? But it does represent what's going to happen in reality. Now, so it's not happening, but it does represent what's going to happen. Yes? Okay. Now, in the beginning, we see a couple of figures, dmuyot, that their job is to carry out that punishment. So let's read the first 2 verses. Okay, I'm in verse 1 and verse 2. Chapter 9. tet. ויקרא באוזני קול רעש גדול לאמור, קרבו פקודות העיר, ואיש כלי משחטו בידו. והנה 6 אנשים באים מדרך שער העליון אשר מפנה צפונה, ואיש כלי מפצו בידו, ואיש אחד בתוכם לבוש בדים, וכסת הסופר במותניו, ויבואו ויעמדו אצל מזבח הנחושת. Okay, let's read the translation here. He then called within my earshot with a loud voice, saying, bring near those appointed over the city, each with his weapon of destruction in his hand. And behold, 6 men were coming from the direction of the upper gate that faces northward, each man with his sledgehammer in his hand. But one man among them was clothed in linen, with scribe's slate at his loins. They came and stood by the copper altar. So the first question is, what is Pekudot Ha'ir? So Pekudot Ha'ir, it seems that these are the angels that their job on peaceful times and during the good times is to guard the city. Right? As we say, Shomrim Hafked, Hafked le'ircha kol hayom v'chol halayla. That's the angels are supposed to protect the city. However, those weapons or those angels or whatever are now targeted not towards the enemies from the outside, but rather inward, towards the city. Okay? So that's number one. Very soon we're going to understand what's the role of this Ha'ish Levush Habadim. By the way, the Ha'ish Levush Habadim made it into our tefillot also in the Arugei Malchut that we say in Yom Kippur, if you're still awake or if you're still in the shul. That's the part where everybody already kind of like at the end of Musaf. So Ha'ish Levush Habadim, we're going the man, whatever man, angel, we'll see in a minute, that is wearing linen, clothed in linen. We'll see what's his function, what exactly. And he has this Keset HaSofer, right? The ink that is used by scribers.
But the Kohen Gadol also is Levush Badim.
I'm sorry?
The Kohen Gadol is also Levush.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, we'll get there in a second. Very good. Now, let's go into the third pasuk. And here it's where like
And Keset Sofer.
it's that.
Keset Sofer is the Sofer, maybe Ezra.
Well, we'll see. It's this thing that, like, you know, where it's a container for the ink.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So third pasuk. Okay, pasuk gimel. Uchvod Elohei Yisrael na'ala me'al hakruv asher haya alav el miftan habayit. ויקרא אל האיש הלבוש הבדים אשר כסת הסופר במותניו. Okay, translates as, then the glory of the God of Israel ascended from atop the cherub on which it had been, going to the threshold of the temple, and he called to the man clothed in linen, on whose loins was the scribe's slate. Now, so Kvod Elohei Yisrael, let's call it Shechina for now, okay? Whatever that means. Moves from above the Kruv, the cherub, in Kodesh HaKodashim, into Miftan Habayit. What do they call it, the Miftan Habayit? I don't know. Atop, from top of the cherub, which is going to the threshold of the temple. The threshold, okay. So it moves, the Kvoda, the Shechina moves from Kodesh HaKodashim, from above the Kruvim, it goes into the threshold of, okay. And that seems that it belongs more into the next chapter. Why? Next chapter is the description of the Shechina leaving the temple. So it looks that it belongs to the next chapter. The question is, why it's here? Have that question in mind. We're going to answer that in 2-3 minutes. Now let's take a look at Psukim Daled and Hey. ויאמר אדוני אליו, עבור בתוך העיר, בתוך ירושלים, והתווית תו על מצחות האנשים הנאנחים והנאנקים, על כל התועבות הנעשות בתוכה. ולאלה אמר באוזני, עברו בעיר אחריו והכו, אל תחוס עיניכם ואל תחמולו. פסוק ו' זקן, בחור ובתולה, וטף ונשים תהרגו למשחית, ועל כל איש אשר עליו התו אל תיגשו, וממקדשי תחלו, ויחלו באנשים הזקנים אשר לפני הבית. I'm going to read that in English. And Hashem said to him, pass through the midst of the city, through the midst of Yerushalayim, and mark a sign on the foreheads of the men who sigh and moan for all the abominations that are done with it. Then he said to those within my earshot, pass through the city behind him and smite. Let your eye not spare and do not have compassion. Old men, young men and maiden, children and women shall you slay to utter destruction. But do not approach any man upon whom is the sign. Begin from my sanctuary, so they begin with the elders who were before the temple. So now we are, yeah. Yes, but we'll see in a second. Now we understand, first of all, what's the role of the Ish Levush Abadim, that person that is wear the linen. He's supposed to mark the people that are, how they call it, ne'enachim ve'ne'enakim, slay and moan, slay and moan for all those abominations that they see in the temple. Those do not approve that. They need to be marked. Why? So the malach, so they'll know not to harm them when they're going to harm everybody else. And this seems like everybody. Zaken, Bachur, Betula, Taf, Nashim, old and young, men, women, whatever, children, everything. And God says not only that, the killing has to start where? In the temple itself. Why? Makes sense. Because previous chapter we saw that those abominations took place in the temple itself. So it has to start in the temple itself. Now, however, we'll see that the angels are not running to do that. Now, if you look at Pasuk Daled, and this relates to Hannah's question, Vihitvita Tav. They need to be marked with a Tav. What's a Tav? Tav, it's the last letter of the alphabet. Right? Now, and in ancient Hebrew writing, was an X.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ancient form of Tav was X.
Oh.
Now, deja vu to what? Also, V'lo yitan hamashchit lingof bachem ve'avar. Come on, somebody.
Amalach.
Hamalach, yeah, but what's the context? Deja vu to what?
In Mitzrayim?
Mitzrayim, thank you very much. In Yetziat Mitzrayim. Remember, Bnei Israel are commanded to mark the mashkof, the doorpost with the blood. So they're going to be saved. Right? So there's a deja vu here. We understand. And do you think that it's coincidental? I don't think so. The idea is to mark those who are saved, because everybody else is going to be destroyed, right? It's exactly like Yetziat Mitzrayim. So we understand. There's something that the text is trying to get us like to think, oh, they're going to be saved like the Jews. That means that everybody else are bad like the Egyptians. At least. All right, okay. Now, if you look at Pasuk Vav, as we said, right? It says like, so you're going to kill everybody, right? Not those who are marked. Those who are marked are not, you can't touch them, but everybody else, right? Okay, fine. I'm going to look in Pasuk Vav. ויחלו באנשים הזקנים אשר לפני הבית. Let's take a look at the next pasuk. ויאמר עליהם, pasuk zayin. So they start with the older people that are, what do they call them? The elders who were before the temple. That's not exactly what God told them. God told them inside the temple. They're starting with the older people before the temple, outside. Okay? Pasuk Zayin. Let's continue with that. ויאמר עליהם, טמאו את הבית ומלאו את החצרות חללים צאו, ויצאו והיכו בעיר. Then they're told, he said to them, defile the temple and fill the courtyards with the slain. Go forth. So they went forth and smote throughout the city. God told them very, very clearly, Umi mikdashi tachelu. You should start in the temple itself. But they start with the people outside the temple. This is why the pasuk says, like God felt that he needs to reiterate the command and tells them what? Tam'u et habayit. Defile the house, meaning the temple. You need to defile the temple itself. Indeed, murder or killing, like a corpse, having a corpse inside the temple will defile the house, right? And that's exactly what God is telling them. Why? Because the Shekhinah is going to leave the house, the temple anyway. And if that's the case, then defiling the house, meaning the temple, makes no difference. God's glory is going to leave the next chapter. It's already happening. It's like we'll see the chariot is already warming up. The engine is already working. So he says, defile the house. What do you care? And because we leave, because the Shekhinah is leaving, you can do that. Makes no difference. Now, this is the second time we actually hear Yechezkel say anything from the beginning of the book. The first time, remember, he said he's complaining to God, I can't eat that. Remember the cake, that Ezekiel bread that he was commanded to eat, and he was commanded to bake it, whatever, on the how do you call it? Glalei behema, on the feces, like feces of animals, and he said, God, I can't do that. Adam, sorry. Adam, right. On men. And he said, I can't do that. So God changed that, use an animal one. Okay, fine. That's the only time up until now that he's talking. This is the second time he's talking. He can't sees those visions and he can't control himself. And he says the following. Pasuk Chet. Let's do Chet, Tet, and Yud. Okay? 8, 9, and 10. ויהי כהכותם ונשאר אני ואפלה על פניי ואזעק ואומר אהה אדוני אלוהים המשחית אתה את כל שארית ישראל בשופכך את חמתך על ירושלים ויאמר אליי עוון בית ישראל ויהודה גדול ומאוד מאוד ותמלא הארץ דמים והעיר מלאה מוטה כי אמרו עזב אדוני את הארץ ואין אדוני רואה וגם אני לא אחוס עיני ולא אחמול דרכם בראשם נתתי. And it was while they were smiting, I remained and I fell upon my face, again, everything in his head. And I cried out and said, God, are you destroying the entire remnant of Israel as you pour out your wrath on Jerusalem? Then he said to me, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is very, very great. The land has been filled with bloodshed, and the city has been filled with injustice, for they have said, God has forsaken the land, and God does not see. So I, too, my eye will not spare, nor will I have compassion. I have placed their way upon their head. Yeah. Well, there's a little bit, but Moshe is trying to save them. Moshe is trying to save them. Yechezkel is not trying to save them. He said, like, are you killing everybody? You'll see. So this is the second time he speaks. The first time it was about him. Personally, I can't eat that cake, God. Now it's about the destiny of the Jewish people. And God's answer repeats the message from the previous chapter. Also, he talks about the abomination, but he's very, very clear. God is very, very clear that the bloodshed, the injustice, that's the last straw. It's not the abomination. Yes, the abominations are bad, like all that stuff that happens in the temple is bad, like all this idol worshiping is bad. But you're doomed because of injustice, iniquity, bloodshed. Period. Now, what's interesting is, if you remember in the previous chapter, they said, Ein Adonai roeh otanu, azab Adonai et haaretz. God doesn't see us. God has left the land. This is why we can do whatever we want. No judge, no judgment, no, right? But here in our chapter, the same reason, azab Adonai et haaretz ve'en Adonai roeh. It's exactly the same reason. God has left the land, he doesn't see us. That's their excuse for the averot sheben adam lachavero, for the injustice, for the bloodshed. So chapter 8, they use that excuse as for the abominations, all the idol worshiping, all that bad stuff. It's ben adam lamakom, between man and God. And now they use the same excuse to justify their violations of ben adam lachavero, between men and men. Yes, Shoshana.
Is it because the people who are now going to be dispersed are lost or something? Or the people who stayed, some of those now started to do the bad.
We'll see in a second. You'll see.
That's why he's upset about Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
Other things already happening, but what about the rest in Jerusalem?
Well, yeah, the temple is not yet
Some
destroyed.
of the rest were the ones who had the X on the.
Well, not everybody.
No, some of them.
Some of them. And we'll see what it means. Just a second. But in any case, so they use that excuse, but in any case, what? That's what God says. In both cases, God says, I do see what they're doing. I see what they're doing. And because of that, I'm going to leave the land. It's not that I'm not here, and because of that, I don't see. It's the opposite. God says it's the opposite. I am here. I see what's going on, and because of that, I'm going to leave. Fine. Now, here, in the last pasuk of the chapter, This man in linen is coming back. פסוק י"א, והנה האיש לבוש הבדים אשר הכסף במותניו משיב דבר לאמור, עשיתי ככל אשר ציוויתני. Just then the man clothed in linen with a slate upon his loins brought back an answer, saying, I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Now, עשיתי ככל אשר ציוויתני, déjà vu. It's exactly the same words that somebody says at a very specific time. And we say it actually every year. No, not yet. Nobody recognize? עשיתי ככל אשר ציוויתני. Okay, הגדה של פסח, ליל הסדר. Okay, remember that section? ארמי עובד אבי, וירד מצרימה. Okay, that is what we call the declaration of the Bikurim. All right, so the farmer, well, it's part of the, in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, it's brought as, part of the history to show like the continuation of the history, like, this is how we ended up here. Our forefathers, like, blah, 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 they started, okay, fine. But where is this taken from? Taken from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 26. This is the declaration of the farmer when he has the first fruit. He goes to Yerushalayim, to the temple. And he says, I've brought the first fruit to you, blah, blah, blah. I've done everything faithfully. I did not cut any corners. I paid the taxes. I did, I gave the gam netativ layatom la'almana lager, blah, blah, blah. I supported the needy. I supported those, all that kind of stuff. I've done what I'm commanded. And Asiti kechol asher tzivitani. I've done what I was commanded. Why is the same language coincidental? I don't think so.
No, it's the same.
Why?
It's the mass, the ties of the good people are the good ones and the bad are.
Okay, so it's to show the contradiction between what's going on here in the times of Yechezkel in the temple and the times that the Torah is talking about. I.e., it's not only that the people brought the gifts to the temple. Nobody cares about that. That's not the important stuff. God already said it's a ben adam lechavero. It's about injustice, bloodshed. What is the farmer saying? The farmer is saying, I've taken care of the needy, the poor, the orphan, the widow, the stranger. I've taken care of them. That's the opposite of injustice. So when Yechezkel uses that particular language, it's immediately, at least throws me back to that. So to the time in which people did the right thing. Right? I had an interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago about with one of my professors about social justice. And he's a professor of theology, Latin American, and it's all about especially in Latin American church, it's it's all social justice and blah 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 and whatever, and influenced by the manifest written by a priest, Catholic priest in the late 60s, Gustavo Gutierrez. And I said, what are you talking about? Social justice? We invented that. This is not, it's not, there's nothing new here. Look through what they call the Hebrew Bible. It's a Jewish concept. Taking care of. So, social justice, taking care of the needy, the poor, the orphan, the people in the margins of society. This is core value of Judaism. This is what God says. If you're going to do that, you're going to live in the land of Israel. You're not going to do it. You're going to be kicked out many, many times. So here they're going to be kicked out of Israel. They're going to die. They're going to lose the land because of that reality that they don't do that. That's exactly what they don't do. So this is why I think that quote, to show the contradiction between the two times. Now, let's go back to the man wearing linen. Now, did he really mark the people with that X? Did he really do what he was commanded to do? So, option one, yes, he did. And he found some people. Option two, he looked everywhere, but he couldn't find any. Okay, two options. Now, the text itself, by reading the text, the pshat, we can support either way. Okay, so for example, we can say that he looked everywhere and couldn't find anyone, not even one tzaddik, not even one person, not even a tzaddik, somebody who is going to say, "Oi," about those abominations, right? Because Yechezkel's reaction say, everybody's going to die. Oh, if everybody's going to die, it means everybody. It means that Ha'ish Levush Avadim, that person was looking everywhere, couldn't find even one person. The problem is reality. The challenge is reality. In reality, not everybody in Yerushalayim were killed. So it's impossible to, right? Okay. You can make an argument that perhaps, well, God has decided to let some people live because they need to continue to tell the story, need witnesses. And we see that, for example, in chapter 12, for example. Okay. But we can say also that the first interpretation is correct, i.e., that he did mark some people, and by doing so, some were saved. Here's the problem. The pasuk, there's a pasuk, if you can flip to chapter 21, verse 8. Forget it, don't worry. There's a chapter 21, verse 8 says that everybody, even it says, even like tzaddik, the tzaddikim are going to be kicked out. So it implies a contradiction to perhaps the fact that he found some tzaddikim. It doesn't, right? So maybe kind of to reconcile that, you can say that he did found tzaddikim, but eventually they were also kicked out of the city. And that's exactly the approach of Chazal. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I apologize for not doing that earlier. I want to give you guys will have to listen. This, I want to quote a Gemara, and I want to quote a Rambam. So just give me a sec. Oops. Okay. So this is taken from, the first one is taken from the Tractate of Shabbat, 55a. דאמר רבי יחא בר רבי חנינא, מעולם לא יצאה מידה טובה מפי הקדוש ברוך הוא וחזר בה לרעה חוץ מדבר זה. Rabbi Yechezkel, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, never did a promise, okay, meaning never did a good attribute emerge from the mouth of God, and he retracted it. Except for our case, and they quote this pasuk Right? What God says to the Ish Levush Abadim, and go and mark the people. Yes. But God didn't say, I'm doing it. God says, let me do it. And then Moshe said, no, God, you can't do that, blah, 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 whatever. And God says, okay, salachti kidvarecha. But God didn't say, I've made up my mind. God said, let me do it. And Moshe said, no. Here, it's different. What they're saying, what the Gemara says, this is the only case where God actually made up his mind, I'm going to do it, and then retracted it. There's a big difference. Okay? So this is our pasuk. Then, Chazal continues, the second paragraph. It says, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leGavriel. God said to the angel Gabriel, Lech urshom al mitzchan shel tzadikim tav shel diyosh lo yishutu b'hem malachei Chabala. Oh, who's that Ish Levush Avadim? Who's that person dressed in linen? According to the Gemara, that's the angel Gabriel. Okay? Doesn't make much of a difference to us. That God told him, go and mark those people, so they're not going to be harmed. Fine. Amra midat adin, I'm in the third paragraph. Amra midat adin lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, the attribute of justice. So, in the name of justice. Okay, this is all very allegoric, guys. This is not, okay? Okay, so justice, so to say, said, Ribono shel olam, God, ma nishtanu elu me'elu? What's the difference between these one and these ones? Amar la, God replied, Halalu tzadikim gemurim ve'halalu reshaim gemurim. What are you talking about? These are tzadikim, these are wicked people. I'm going to punish the wicked people, not the righteous one. What's the question? Amra lefanav, okay, justice. Said, God, haya beyadam limchot velo michu. They should have protested. They should have rebuked. They should have warned. They didn't do it. So the fact that they didn't themselves, they didn't do the injustice, but they didn't rebuke, they didn't protest, they didn't protect their families and friends, they didn't do enough, makes them also wicked ones. So why do you spare them? Amar la, God said, Galui veyadu lefanai she'imichu b'hem lo yekablu mehem. What do you want? God says, even if they would protest, even if they would talk to them, even if they tried, those wicked people would not listen. I know that, God says, because I know the future. They wouldn't listen anyway. Amra lefanav, justice says again, I lefanecha galui, lahem galui. Okay, that's you, God. You know the future. They don't. Those people that you call tzaddikim, they don't know. They have no way of knowing. They have no reason to believe that the others are not going to listen to them. And because of that, they should have protested. And because of that, they should have rebuked them. And they didn't do that. And because of that, they are reshaim as well, and they deserve to die as well, just like the others. Last paragraph. And here, there's a quote of our pasuk. Zakenu bachur betula taf enashim, that you start from, start killing the people, starting in the temple. Uchtiv, however, the description of the text says what? They start with the people outside, the threshold. Tanach Rabbi Yosef, what Rabbi Yosef learned from that? Al tikri mikdashi ella mekudashai. Says, read not my sanctuary. So it's a play on the vowels, saying, but rather those who sanctified to me. These are the people who observe the whole Torah in its entirety from Aleph through Tav, from A to Z. And immediately, and behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lies towards the north, and blah, blah, blah. Our pasuk. What's going on here? What is it the Chazal are trying to teach us? Chazal approach is the middle road, trying to say, yes, he did mark people. There were some people who were righteous, however, not enough. It's not black and white. They were better than the others, but they are to blame also, and therefore eventually they were punished as well. And therefore, they use that as a what? As a text proof for that God changed his mind, and that's the only time that is recorded, at least, that God changed his mind. Now,
I have a question.
yes, just a second, Shoshana, just a second. Yes.
So what does it mean, righteous? Full righteous, because if they don't, and if they let the bad men, the wicked men, to do whatever they have to
Yeah.
do, so they are not a complete right.
They're not complete righteous, but like they're righteous in their deeds. That's exactly the point of Chazal. So they didn't do the bad stuff, but they're not really righteous. Yes, Shoshana, quickly, yeah.
It's a case of Hillel and Shammai. Chazal take the Shammai attitude. You could have just as well said, God said, okay.
No, it's not Hillel and Shammai. It's not. It's Tzedakah Mishpat, and that goes all the time. It's just.
They don't know if they didn't retribute the others. They
No.
don't
But the
know.
idea is it's Tzedakah Mishpat. It's like Tzion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaveh b'tzedakah.
Yeah.
You can't build a world, we spoke about that in the past, that is based only on justice.
It's like a mashal. They take it as certain that
Obviously.
did not rebuke, and that's not right.
Of course.
That's
You
the
can't-
Hillel part. That's the
But the
Hillel.
idea, there's a principle, a core principle in Judaism. It's not all, justice is, obviously, it's the basic. We can't, the Torah reject any form of corruption. Justice is the basis. However, and that what comes all the time, justice by itself is not enough.
Justice,
Because justice, if you remember, we spoke about that in the past. That's midat sdom. Sheli, sheli, shelcha, shelcha. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. That is justice to the extreme. It's only about justice. No compassion, no special circumstances, no trying to understand, none of that stuff. And that's what we reject. That could lead you to Sdom. We believe in justice, but on top of that, there's another layer. It's called rachamim. It's compassion. Because our relationship with God is of children and parent. Anyone who's a parent knows that there are certain times that you actually literally want to kill your children. Because they do things that they just, right? And how many times did we say, like, if you're going to do it one more time, I'm going to have to punish you or whatever. And eventually you didn't.
I saw you from the window.
Why? Yeah, but why? That's justice. I'm supposed to.
Oh,
Because it's compassion. Because it's your children and you have compassion. And the compassion that parents have towards their children is endless. And that's exactly what God, that's the way God treats us as well. And then the next step is what the Torah is trying to teach us, that we need to have that also with our fellow men. Perhaps not to that extent, because it's not really possible. But the principle is there. There's always special circumstances. There's always something, whatever. And you know, it's like if somebody is you know, the classic case that the Torah talks about, that somebody is poor and you lend money and they're late with the payment. And they gave you a, you know, the clothes as a collateral. You still need to give the clothes. Is it fair? No, that's the collateral. You still need to give it, because what is going to do? He's got nothing. Compassion. You can't build, at least Jewish, according to the Torah, society without compassion. Now,
And I want to hear that God has the compassion, so I want to believe that God did.
God has a compassion. Okay, but what I want to do is, we're running out of time. What I want to do is interesting idea, right? Because Chazal are saying what? God has decided and changed his mind. Whoa. What does it mean? It means that the prophet is a false prophet. If I'm the prophet and I'm going to say, I know Shoshana says no, because Shoshana already know what I'm going to say, because I mentioned that like 2 years ago, and Shoshana comes to all my classes and she knows what I'm saying. But
Overestimation.
The point is, if I'm God's prophet and I'm going to say God is going to do X and it's not happening, that makes me a false prophet, right? Wrong. Let's take a look at the Rambam. Yes.
Does it talk about pity, rachamim to the wicked?
Yeah. Also, to some extent, yes. I want to take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam, just flip the page, guys. The Rambam, Ilchot Yesodei Torah in Mishneh Torah, 10th chapter, Halacha Daled, says the following. דברי הפורענות שהנביא אומר, כגון שאמר פלוני ימות או שנה פלוני רעב או מלחמה וכיוצא בדברים האלה, אם לא עמדו דבריו, אין בזה הכחשה לנבואתו. A prophet that says X is going to happen, meaning somebody's going to die, or next year is going to be a year of famine, or there's going to be a war, or whatever that is, didn't happen in reality, it doesn't mean that he is a false prophet. ואין אומרים הנה דיבר ולא בא. It's not true to say, oh, you said X didn't happen. שהקדוש ברוך הוא, and this is key, שהקדוש ברוך הוא ערך אפיים ורב חסד וניחם על הרעה. Because God is compassion. And maybe what? ואפשר שעשו תשובה ונסלח להם כאנשי נינווה. And perhaps they did tshuva. Just like the people of Nineveh. Remember the story of Jonah? What was the problem of Jonah? Jonah says to the people of Nineveh, עוד 40 יום ונינווה נהפכת. 40 days and you guys are toasted. What happens? Nothing. Why? Because they did tshuva. Once he went there and he said what he had to say, the king of Nineveh took it to his heart. Everybody did tshuva, whatever that means. And the decree was removed. So Jonah is what? Depressed. He wants to die. And we asked back then, why? You should be happy. No. You know why he's depressed and he wants to die? Because I'm a false prophet. Come, the Rambam says, no. If you said that something bad is going to happen, the prophet says something bad is going to happen, it doesn't mean that the prophet was wrong or the prophet is a false prophet, because what happens is maybe there was a process of tshuva. People are able to correct their ways in the meantime. Aval, I'm towards the end of the third line. אבל אם הבטיח על טובה, ואמר שיהיה כך וכך ולא באה טובה, שאמר, בידוע שהוא נביא שקר. However, the flip side, if the prophet said something good is going to happen, and that didn't happen, well, this is exactly the test. And you know it's a false prophet. So there's a difference. There's a difference between what is the message of the prophet. If the prophet says something bad is going to happen, and it didn't happen, it doesn't mean that he's a false prophet, because maybe they did tshuva in the process. But if the prophet said something good is going to happen, and it doesn't happen, then you know that he's a false prophet. And he gives like more examples, blah, 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 blah. He talks about the first time of the first chapter, and then there's a Yirmiyahu. And that's the test of the Rambam. So back to our case of Yechezkel. Yechezkel said everybody's going to die. Not everybody died. Maybe some people did tshuva. The fact that not everybody died doesn't mean that Yechezkel is a false prophet. Okay? This is how
Nichamtanu.
Nichamtan, yes. Okay. That's not me, that's the Gemara, and that's the Rambam based on the Gemara. I'm definitely not original here. That's not me. Okay, now it's 11:52, and my question is, do we start into chapter 10? Yeah, of course, we have 8 more minutes of Torah. Why are we going to waste them, right? Let's go into, this is the advanced class today. It's like we're going a little bit faster than I expected. Okay, we're going to chapter 10. Chapter 10 starts the third part of that long nevuah. Again, starts at chapter 8 and chapter 11. So now we're in the third unit, right? Yechezkel has his virtual tour in Yerushalayim. The elders of Yehuda sit in front of him in his house in Bavel. And now we're going to start. We're going to see that description of the Shekhinah leaving the Mikdash. However, before that, the couple of verses that go back and forth between that incident of the Shekhinah leaving the Mikdash and the stuff that is still happening with Gabriel, Amalach, the angel, the man with the linen, and the other angels, and that kind of stuff. Okay, let's take a look at that. Pasuk, let's read, I'm going to read the first 7 psukim of this chapter. והנה על הרקיע של ראש הכרובים כאבן ספיר, כמראה דמות כיסא נראה עליהם. ויאמר אלי איש לבוש עבדים, ויאמר, בוא אל בינות לגלגל, אל תחת לכרוב ומלא חופניך גחלי אש, מבינות לכרובים וזרוק על העיר ויבוא לעיני. והכרובים עומדים מימין לבית בבוא האיש, והענן מלא את החצר הפנימית. וירום כבוד אדוני מעל הכרוב על מפתן הבית, וימלא הבית את הענן, והחצר מלאה את נוגה כבוד אדוני. וכל כנפי הכרובים נשמע עד החצר החיצונה ככל אל שדי בדברו. ויהי בצוותו את האיש לבוש עבדים לאמור, קח אש מבינות לגלגל, מבינות לכרובים, ויבוא ויעמוד אצל האופן, וישלח הכרוב את ידו מבינות לכרובים, אל האש אשר בינות הכרובים, ויצא וייתן אל חופני לבוש עבדים, ויקח ויצא. Let's read it in English. Then I saw that, behold, on the top of the expanse that was above the heads of the Kruvim, something like a sapphire stone, like the appearance of the likeness of a throne, could be seen over them. Then he said to the man clothed in linen, come between the galgal, between the cherub, and fill your cupped hands with fire coals from among the Kruvim, and throw them upon the city. He entered before my eyes. The Kruvim were standing to the right of the temple when the man came, and a cloud filled the inner courtyard. Then the glory of God rose up from upon the Kruv and rested upon the rest hold of the temple, and the temple was filled with the cloud, and the courtyard was filled with the glow of the glory of Hashem. And the sound of the wings of the Kruvim was heard up to the outer courtyard like voice of El Shaddai, whatever that means in a minute, when he speaks. It happens when he commanded the men clothed in linen, saying, take the fire from between the Galgal, from between the Kruvim, that he came and stood near the Ofan. The Kruv stretched out his hand from between the Kruvim to the fire that was between the Kruvim, and he carried it and put it into the cup, like a cup, hands of the one clothed in linen. Then he took it and went out. Okay, we're not going to be able to cover the whole thing, but we are back with a man dressed in linen. What's going on here? So
Who is
what is
in the Kodesh Kodashim.
Yes, but what's the connection between the Merkava, all the chariot, right? We're talking about the Kruvim, the Ofanim, the Galgal, all that stuff. We talked about it in the past, which is obviously the description of the chariot, like with the wheels and all that, right? And that man dressed in linen. Well, the connection is the chariot, right? So the chariot is the vehicle. We're talking about it, the drone. It's like a drone, right? That is the vehicle for the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is going to use. Shekhinah is going to go into that chariot, that vehicle. But it also has Gachalei Esh, coal, fire. And what that person, Levush Abadim, that man dressed in linen, what he's supposed to do? He's supposed to take some and do what? Throw on the city. He's supposed to take those fiery coals and throw it on the city. Now, this idea of fire on the city is not a new idea. We already heard that in the 5th chapter, if you remember, when Yechezkel is commanded to shave his hair, right? So 1/3 of the hair is going to be burned, that representing the fire in Yerushalayim. So this idea of fire in Yerushalayim is not a new idea. So, but what is the symbolism? What is the symbolism of a man? Okay, I get it, it's an angel, okay, but whatever. He's described as a man and throwing that fire on the city. Deja vu? You were on that, Shoshana. That's you got it earlier. It's the Kohen Gadol. It's the high priest on Yom Kippur. He is also Levush Badim. He is dressed in linen, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in the temple. And then what he does? Melo chofnav ketoret velakach melo hamachta gachalei esh me'al hamizbeach umelo chofnav ketoret ve'evi mibet haparochet. The Kohen Gadol is going to take also coal from the fire together with incense. It's exactly the same thing. Coincidental? I don't think so. So what's going on? What's the symbolism here? The Kohen Gadol in Kodesh HaKodashim, the holiest moment of the year in Yom Kippur, that's what he does. He's going to take those coals, that's part of the Avodah, in what?
And he's
going to bring it to Kodesh HaKodashim, right? He's going to bring those coals, the Kohen Gadol bring those coals into Kodesh HaKodashim, where the Kruvim, where the Shekhinah is, For what? To atone for Bnei Israel, to achieve atonement. וכיפר על בני ישראל מכל טומאותם. This is how he does it. That's part of the, there's korbanot, there's part of the ritual is taking those coals into Kodesh HaKodashim, where the Shekhinah is, where the Kruvim are, and achieve it by doing that, part of a process, to get atonement for Bnei Israel. Now, this man, whatever, Levush Abadim, right? The same idea of linen garment. He's going to do the same thing, but in the opposite direction. He's going to take those coals from Kodesh HaKodashim, where the Shekhinah is, and throw it on the city. To destroy the city. So what's the symbolism?
God is going to destroy.
Exactly. There's no kapara. There's no atonement. I'm removing the atonement that was achieved, perhaps.
So there is no Maccabi.
That's it. No more. No more atonement, no nothing. That's it. Verdict is done. Stay with me for 2 more minutes. But what happens in reality? Does he do it? No. Haish Levush Avadim, that figure, that man is not doing it. We see that like in the previous chapter, we saw that he was supposed to do what? To mark the people in Yerushalayim, the tzaddikim in Yerushalayim. So if he's doing that, he's supposed to be the good guy. He's supposed to be the good guy in contrast to the other 6 angels that's supposed to destroy the city. He is supposed to save. Okay. Now we understand why he's not doing it. He's not throwing the coals. What does he do? He stands by the Kruvim and he's waiting there. He's waiting there. He takes the stuff, he takes the coals, and he leaves it in his hands. He doesn't throw it. He holds on to the coals. And then what? One of the cherubs, whatever that means, one of those Kruvim takes the coals. I'm sorry, the Ish Levush Abadim doesn't do anything. He's frozen. He doesn't take the coals. So one of the Kruvim actually takes the coals and give it to that man. What happens here? And that's a fascinating thing. The coals chill. They get colder. They lose temperature. They lose temperature. You take them out of the fire. You hold on to them. That's what's going to happen.
It's very ambivalent.
Of course, it's symbolic, right? And the Gemara in Masechet Yomah says the following. And with that, we're going to finish. אלמלא לא נצטננו גחלים מידו של כרוב לידו של גבריאל, לא נשתיירו משונאיהן של ישראל שריד ופליט. משונאיהן של ישראל, that's לשון סגי נאור, obviously. Means, if not for the fact that Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, which is the Ish Levush Abadim, that man dressed in linen, holding on to the coals, chilling them, causing them to lose heat, temperature, nobody would have remained. So he was holding them, cooling them off in a metaphoric way, cooling off the verdict. The verdict. And Rashi says on the same thing. והוא ביקש מן הכרוב לתיתם לו כדי שיצטננו הגחלים ותקל הגזרה. It's not that he was frozen, Rashi says. He deliberately asked the Kruv, you give it to me, because what happens when you have hot water and you want to cool it off? What do?
You transfer it from one very
Exactly. It's like I remember my grandfather, like from one cup to the other one, right? Like, that's what you do to cool them off. So by asking that proof to take and move, so it's like moving the hot coals from one vessel to the other to cool them off. And then when he gets them and they're a little bit, he still doesn't throw it. Then he doesn't do it. And Rashi says the following, and with this I'm ending. Rashi says the following, based on the Midrash. Lo zerakam miyad, he didn't throw them. Ve'af al pi shekiblam levush abadim lo yishlicham ad la'achar 6 shanim lekabalato. And even though he received those calls, he did not throw them for 6 years. He was holding on to them for 6 years. שנתעממו הגחלים בידו כל 6 שנים. And throughout that time period, throughout those 6 years, the coals were losing heat and getting colder and colder and colder for 6 years. ותדע, שהרי נבואה זו בשנה השישית נאמרה, בעיר חרבה בשנת 11. And how does Rashi come to this crazy idea? He said this prophecy was given in the 6th year of Yechezkel in the exile. And what was the destruction of the temple actually took place? On the 11th year. So it's 6 years after, or the 12th year, whatever. Fascinating. And obviously we understand what it means, like metaphorically. So God says something, it's done, it's happening already, but there's still like ways, there's still like something in the process to delay, and that delay is going to cool off also the punishment itself.
Or maybe the children of Israel repent on this time, during this time.
We'll see. Maybe it's an opportunity to repent. We'll see. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place.
Thank you so much. It was fascinating as usual. Thank you.
We're going to continue with from that point. Okay, let me just do this.